Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And throughout this week, I'm doing reviews for a bunch of spoof comedies in honor of April Fool's Day. Today's review is for the 1988 film The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. Here's your trivia question for today. In the film, how do Frank and Jane practice safe sex? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So, in the film The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad, we meet one of our characters, Officer Nordberg, who is currently trying to work a case. Now, unfortunately, things go south pretty fast and he ends up in the hospital. His superior, Frank Drebin, swears that he will solve this case and get revenge for Nordberg. So, Frank's investigation seems to lead towards Vincent Ludwig. However, though, nothing seems to be able to be pinned on him specifically. While checking up on Ludwig, Frank also runs into his assistant, Jane, and the two of them seem to hit it off pretty well. Now, things become much harder for the police squad to solve, being the fact that they also are now in charge of protecting the Queen while she's in the country visiting. So, will the police squad eventually figure out what Vincent Ludwig is up to and be able to keep the Queen safe while doing so? So, this movie is directed by David Zucker. It was also written by a group of people that are very well known at making spoof comedies: Jim Abrahams, Jerry and David Zucker, and Pat Proft. The movie is a pseudo spin off slash continuation of the television series Police Squad, which was also a spoof comedy television series. Now, there are two reasons why the film is called The Naked Gun. The first reason is because they knew that the word naked would pull people in no matter what. The second reason is because they actually had a list of 30 different names, this one being their favorite, that they wanted to change the title to, because the original title was just Police Squad the movie. The reason that they wanted to change that is some of the writers for this film actually also co-created Police Academy the film, and they didn't want there to be any confusion. So both the television series and the movie were spoofing police dramas and police television series. But here are some of the other films that they were making fun of or spoofing in this: Double Indemnity from 1944, Farewell My Lovely from 1975, The Rules of the Game from 1939, Game of Death from 1978, Telephone from 1977, The Pink Panther from 1963, the James Bond film series, and they even borrowed a few gags from the Get Smart television series from 1965 and the Sledgehammer television series from 1986. Here's an interesting question for you. What two things do all three of the films, The Naked Gun, A Fish Called Wanda, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, have in common? First of all three of them were released in 1988. And secondly, all three of them have scenes of someone being run over by a steamroller. There are only three actors that play the same character from the television series into the film. That would be Leslie Nielsen as Frank Drebin, Ed Williams as Ted Olson, and Tiny Ron as Al. There were two actors that were actually recast for the film. George Kennedy took over as Ed, and O.J. Simpson as Norberg, which, by the way, this was many years before his trial. Ricardo Montalban plays the villain Vincent Ludwig, and he was actually chosen due to his performance in the film Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. The funny thing is, he only did this film to be able to pay for a new car. The character of Jane Spencer is played by Priscilla Presley, but they originally offered the role to Bo Derek. Weird Al Yankovic makes a cameo in all three of the Naked Gun films. In the first one, he's playing himself. Dr. Joyce Brothers also makes a brief cameo in the film as herself, although somehow she's a baseball announcer. John Houseman played the character of the driving instructor. This was unfortunately his final film before his death. Ludwig's secretary is played by Charlotte Zucker, who is actually the mother of both the director and one of the writers of this film. The baseball player Reggie Jackson technically plays himself, although he is sent as an assassin after the Queen. Here's something interesting though. A few years after this film was made, Queen Elizabeth II actually did attend an Oakland A's versus Baltimore Orioles game. Reggie Jackson was there as a coach and got to meet her. During that event, some news channels thought it would be funny to show the movie footage of the Queen throwing out the ball as a gag. One last thing related to that, when the Queen passed away in 2022, Reggie Jackson actually tweeted, "Now we all know I was innocent." Aside from Reggie Jackson, there actually were quite a few other athletes, announcers, and umpires that were all in the film as well. Here's a bit of interesting continuity you may have never noticed before. When Frank goes to the Ludwig meatpacking plant, he gets in a fight with a guy who ends up falling into a vat of some liquid. Now, as he sinks below this liquid, we can see his hand and we see the ring on his finger. Now, later on in the film, Ludwig is eating a hot dog when all of a sudden he pulls a ring out of his mouth and then out of the hot dog bun, a finger. In the film, they make it seem like the baseball field that is used is the home field for the California Angels. In actuality, it was Dodger Stadium that was used. The marching band that walks over the crushed Ludwig was in actuality the Spirit of Troy marching band from the University of Southern California. In the original script, the hospital was not just called the hospital. It was actually called Our Lady Who Never Got the Pickle. Ricardo Montalban found that very disrespectful, so it was changed. As you've probably figured out by now, this movie was entirely filmed in California. There are, by the way, two sequels to this film, and as of today, they released the trailer for the remake that will be starring Liam Neeson, which comes out later this year. So, when it comes to the film, The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad, I still enjoy this movie to this day, and I get quite a few laughs from it. So, I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. Now, if you enjoyed this movie, other films I recommend checking out are National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1, Johnny English, Top Secret, and Hot Shots. Now it's time to answer the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. In the film, how do Frank and Jane practice safe sex? They use giant body condoms. Now, I know the picture for this isn't all that clear, but in case you're wondering what it says on them, they are called Titans, one rolled latex condom. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. And if there's any other spoof comedies you think should get a trivia review, feel free to mention them in the comments. They'll either show up this week or if I do it again for next year.